Hello everyone, this is Lean and welcome back to the Rochelle and Miller YouTube channel. Today I'm featuring Mother and Baby Bird digital stem from Rochelle Anna Miller, which was released in April. This adorable stem set has two birds in it, and actually, although it's mother and baby bird, you can definitely use it for so many other occasions. So you can use it for Mother's Day, but you can also make it a masculine card and use it for Father's Day. You can use this as big sister, little sister, you can use it any way you want to. I decided to create a baby card with it, so that's also another option that you have. Now, before I started coloring, I printed this image out and I decided to fussy cut this image. Now that took me ages because I am not used to fussy cutting, and as you know, these lovely swirls from Rochelle and Miller, I really took my time to still be able to include them and not snip them off, for example. So I did that ahead of time because I wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to fussy cut it correctly and not ruin it while fussy cutting. So to avoid having colored everything in and then fussy cut it and snipping off things, I first did the fussy cutting. First the hardest part and then evolving towards the easiest parts of my cards. That is how I prefer working, to be sure that I'm not wasting my time to ruin it afterwards. Now, about the coloring, I'm always doing a list of the Copic markers. I'm putting it in the description box every time here on this YouTube channel. If you want to revisit it afterwards, you can always check out my blog post. There you also have everything listed. Now, as I said, this is going to be a baby card, and I wasn't sure which colors I was going to use today. I really love just having neutral birds, but then again, everything was going to be with neutrals, having the nest and the branch and everything. So I decided to go really bright with the birds and have a blue one and a yellow one. So that's what I'm going to do later on. But first I started on the branch and I started on the nest because I never colored a nest, I think. So I wasn't sure about which colors to use and whether that was going to work. So I first had to figure that out before starting on the birds. So there were a lot of things that was coloring for the first time for me, and so I did that. In the end, I really like the color that I used for the nest. It's really bright at the same time, but I wanted it to stand out enough from the branch as well, to not have it completely the same. So here I'm doing that, and I'm just going over it a second time. The paper that I'm using is Translotype Perfect Coloring Paper, which is a great paper if you're working with alcohol markers. It helps me to add quite a lot of layers if I need to, and normally I need at least 2 layers to get the blend that I want. But with this paper, if you need more, you can definitely continue adding layers. So, another thing that I could really recommend when you're Copic coloring is having a colorless blender. The colorless blender is for me a lifesaver. I don't think that there is any card that I am creating, any coloring that I'm doing without using that colorless blender. I'm not perfect, and so every time I go outside the lines, at least once. And I prefer having everything inside the lines. You can definitely just leave it as is, but well, I just cannot handle that, so I need a colorless blender. Another thing that you can do to fix mistakes is also use a white jelly roll pen. But that's a difficult one if you still have to color the part where you went inside with the wrong marker. So then you need to see if the marker will be darker or lighter. Depending on that, you have an issue or not. So I tend to use a colorless blender on every card. So that's really handy as well. Now here for the birds and for the coloring, I decided to just see where the birds were facing to add the light source. So in this case, the bird is facing towards the right, so the light is on the right, the shadows are on the left side. And I used this blue combination, I used it in the past. I know that it works. It might be strange on a bird, I don't know. But I wanted to have everything stand out a bit more. I'm also using yellows later on the card and on the tiny bird. So in the end, the blue really helps because blue and yellow, in a way, they just really reinforce each other. So whenever I'm doubting and I'm using one of those colors, I quite quickly grab towards the other one as well. So as I said, going over that a second time just helped me a bit more with the blend. And if I need to, and I think I will, or I have on this bird, I will add more layers as well. So I'm just working my way through my markers. I also color from darkest to lightest, but there are many ways to color with alcohol markers. And I just always say, and I really stand behind this, you do you. So if you feel more comfortable coloring first by adding a light layer of your lightest marker and working your way from there, that's perfectly fine. I think it's important to have fun and to like the end result that you have. Just something that you need to take into account is that depending on which way you are coloring or what your preferred technique is, it might change a bit or is a bit different from the end result that you might see here or by someone else on YouTube if that person is using another technique. It's something to keep in mind. It will not be ugly. It might just be a bit different, and so for that I think it's really handy to just know that. It's something that was illustrated by Sandy Elnock on her YouTube channel, so I definitely recommend. The video has been out there for a while now, but she colored one image 3 times using exactly the same markers, but just by starting with another color or starting with another technique, it gave 3 completely different end results. So therefore, if you want exactly the same, I would suggest doing the same, but it's not needed, and I never recreate a card also due to that. I cannot recreate exactly the same card. So if my first go was perfect, in my opinion, then my second card will never be as good as my first one. So I tend to avoid making exactly the same cards because even though I would use exactly the same technique as I'm showing here, I would not succeed in getting exactly the same result. So just keep that in mind. If you're using another technique, that's perfectly fine. That's perfect. But don't think necessarily that yours isn't good because you have a slightly different result. It will be just perfect in its own way. So here for the background, I'm just going to do a bit of a gradient on the bottom half of this card. That's why I didn't mask off the edge on the top. I'm using yellows, sort of a throwback to the small bird that is in the nest. It's something that I like doing. I like clean and simple cards, and a way to create that for me is to reuse colors in ways. So I could have used blue as well, in my opinion. There were my 2 options to get a bit of color in the background here. But I went for the one that I wasn't showing the most. I had thin foam squares all over the back of this image, and then I adhered it sort of centered on the top of this card. Then next up I have the baby. This die is from Pretty Pink Posh. It's the baby script, if I'm not wrong. And well, it's gorgeous. I just decided to cut it out twice and then stack it on top of each other to just have a tiny bit of dimension, not too much. So I'm doing that. I'm not adding anything from color because I'm going to add this white on top of the yellow and returning colors on the top of my card. I also have a white area so that baby will really pop on top of the yellow, and it will still all belong with each other. It will still match because I also have a lot of white here. So I'm just adding some liquid glue and then I'm placing it on the bottom right of this card. I'm also leaving a bit of room. I still want to add a few embellishments. So I'm doing that, popping it on top of my card panel. And then I decided to take some heart sprinkles. Now I decided upon the hearts, but I didn't know to go with the browns or the white ones. In the end, I ended up using white because I was going to also add a few around the baby. White with white, popping from on top of the yellow. So that was kind of my thought process here. And then a few on top as well to have everything sort of cohesive with one another. On this branch, I had a few boo-boos, and it was really hard since it was already fuzzy cut to get rid of it with my colorless blender. So then you have, of course, the white Jelly Roll pen. As I said earlier, you can use that. Since I'm not going to color that border, I don't need to worry about other markers, and I can just use that white Jelly Roll. So once the hearts are adhered, I just have to add this panel on top of a card base, and then this card will be completely finished. I'm not adding anything more. You can if you want to, but this for me is clean and simple with quite a lot of details since we're using Rochelle Anna Miller digital stamps, but a really simple, gorgeous, vibrant baby card, if you ask me. And it is, well, you can use it for any gender, in my opinion, so that's a bonus as well. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you got inspired to maybe try this mother and baby bird digital stamp out yourself. Thank you so much for stopping by. I truly appreciate you all being here. And I want to wish you all an incredible day, and I'll be back soon. Bye!